Mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami, tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami, tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, penggak demokrasi bangsa. pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. pengawas pemilihanku. Mendidik negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, berjuang untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Doa semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Ayo mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, penggerak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama pada pengawas pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, penggerak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama pada pengawas pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihanku, mendidik negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, berjuang untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Doa semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Ayo mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Pancasila, berdaulat untuk merawat demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, mewujudkan harapan reformasi. Doa semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Ayo mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, pemenang demokrasi bangsa. Bersama pada pengawas pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, pemenang demokrasi bangsa. Bersama pada pengawas pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengenai kenegaraan dan berjiwaan Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, mewujudkan harapan reformasi. Doa semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Adil mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, pemenang demokrasi bangsa. Bersama pada pengawas pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, pemenang demokrasi bangsa. Bersama pada pengawas pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengenai kenegaraan dan berjiwaan Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, mewujudkan harapan reformasi. Doa semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi.
Tes, tes, tes.
Hidup adil mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami, tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa.
Cek.
Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami, tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengabdi untuk negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami, tak akan berhenti, ayo pemilihan umum, menghidup negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur ayo mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, untuk demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, untuk demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, menghidup negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur ayo mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, untuk demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, untuk demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, menghidup negara dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, wujudkan harapan reformasi. Kobar semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur ayo mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh Pancasila bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasar undang-undang kami pun berdiri, mewujudkan harapan reformasi. Walau semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengenai kenegaraan dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa Indonesia. Berdasarkan undang-undang kami pun berdiri, mewujudkan harapan reformasi. Walau semangat kami tak akan berhenti, ayo awasi. Jujur, adil, mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama Badan Pengawas Pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. 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 Kita tegakkan keadilan p menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, mengenai demokrasi bangsa. Bersama pada pengawas pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama pada pengawas pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Kami pengawas pemilihan umum, mengenai kenegaraan dan berjiwa Pancasila, bertugas untuk mengawal demokrasi bangsa di Indonesia. Berdasarkan undang-undang kami pun berdiri, mewujudkan harapan reformasi. Pengawas mandat kami, taat dan berhenti. Ayo awasi, adil mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga semangat kami tak akan berhenti. Ayo awasi, jujur adil mandiri, berintegritas tinggi, menjaga hak pilih di seluruh negeri. Bersama rakyat, awasi pemilu, demokrasi maju. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa. Bersama badan pengawas pemilu, kita tegakkan keadilan pemilu. Pengawas pemilu, tonggak demokrasi bangsa.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua, namo buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Good evening to the Honorable Chairman of Bawaslu, Mr. Rahmat Bagja, the Honorable Deputy of Administration, Mr. Ferdinand Escoltiar Sirait, Professor Dr. Gerrit Hendrik Ading, Professor of Law of Utrecht University, Professor Dr. Kai Liu, Professor of Law of Jiangsu Normal University, the expert staff of Bawaslu, invited scholars, and all honorable guests, both present in this room and virtually. I am pleased to meet you here today at the focus group discussion on good governance, labor law, and election in digital era. I am Puspa Puspita, and I am honored to have the opportunity to guide this discussion today. In order to begin, I am privileged to invite Mr. Rahmat Bagja to give us welcome speech and also insight on the objectives of this discussion and general brief introduction of this discussion, as well as opening the event. Mr. Rahmat Bagja, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat malam, salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Peace to all of you. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. The Honorable Professor Dr. Gerrit Hendrik Ading, I usually just say Prof. Ading, Professor of Law, Utrecht University. Not the C word is not spelled. Utrecht, sometimes Utrecht. You can follow Mr. Ading, Professor Ading. He's my previous in 2008, my lecture for the good governance course in the Utrecht. And also the Honorable Professor Dr. Kai Liu, Professor of Law, Jiangsu University, Utrecht alumni also. We have shared maybe the memories of Actor St. Peter and also the beautiful of Utrecht. The Honorable Mr. Ferdinand Escoltiar Sirait, the Deputy for Administrative Administration of Bawaslu. He is student of UI, University of Indonesia, for the doctoral program, communication program, yes. And Honorable Mr. Dayanto, expert staff. I think you must brave enough to speak English now, yes? Okay. And Honorable Mr. and Mrs. Commissioner of Bawaslu Province and Bawaslu Regency and City, a lot from the West Java and Jakarta, because a lot of people, a lot of commissioners have supervised the process until the late of 2024. And also the Honorable Officer and Secretariat of Bawaslu, and also the Utrecht alumni, Mr. Lulu, your student also, and then Mr. Nona Frizal. He is also the previously member of the Komnas HAM, it's like Human Rights Committee in Indonesia, and also Hazel. Not hazelnut, isn't it? Hazel. Hazel is in the, I don't know, maybe you can share with the others how the memory of the Utrecht University. And also the staff who want to join the Utrecht University, or maybe will get the scholarship provided by the state. You can also choose the Utrecht University to make your thesis or make your dissertations. It's an honor and privilege to welcome you to this significant focus group discussion on crucial theme of good governance, labor law, and election in digital era. Today we gather as mutual partners in the pursuit of democratic ideals and effective governance in the rapidly evolving landscape of the digital age. We have now, Bawaslu is one of the elections organization, we have 3 election organization. First is General Election Committee. Here, the function of General Election Committee is to help the process of the elections, and then the Bawaslu, the Election Supervisory Committee, to supervise the general election. Also, the people and the political party who will compete these elections. And the third is the Committee of Ethics of the Committee of Ethics. The previous chairman is Prof. Jimli Asidiki. After he is retired for the Chief of Justice for the Constitutional Court, he joined to the Committee Ethics of the election officers. The Committee Ethics of election officers is supervise our duty, our performance in according to the ethics of the code of conduct. And then we navigate the complexity of governance and electoral process. We find ourselves of juncture where the intersection of technology and democracy present both unprecedented opportunities and challenges. The advent of the digital era has revolutionized the way society engage with political process, challenging us to adapt and innovate in the interest of transparency, inclusivity, and the overall enhancement of democratic values. I think we have the interesting discussion about how the principle of good governance make the law of the election is going. I think this is the very interesting discussion. Also, we must encourage you, to each of you, of the participants, to actively participate in the exchange of ideas, drawing on your diverse experience and perspective. Through the collaborative effort, we can forge and path forward that ensure the integrity of election, uphold the principle of good governance, and safeguard the democratic ideals that are the foundation of our societies. Let us approach this discussion with a spirit of cooperation, recognizing that our collective efforts have the potential to shape the future of governance and elections, not only in Indonesia, but across the globe. Indonesia, Bawaslu is now the president of the Global Network for Electoral Justice. Maybe we share the date of our conference, yeah, Mr. Deputy. We have 5 and until 7 December, conference in 2023, conference in Bandung. Invited the Scientific Committee of Global Network for Electoral Justice. Global Network for Electoral Justice is like the society of the organization which have a function to solve the election law problems. The Constitutional Court, and then also the organization like Bawaslu, they together join the Global Network for Justice. And then we have the conference in 5 and 7 December. Because of what? Because if there's mid-December until late December, everybody going to the vacations. Because of that, we must take the in 5 and 7 September. I will invite you, the Utrecht alumni, to discuss about the theme is like the social media involving democratic values and of democratic process in our also the previous elections. Thank you, and let's embark on this journey of exploration and collaboration together. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bagja. Please let me reiterate a brief introduction of this event today. The panel will be talking about the role of constitutional law on good governance and how it shapes election amidst the digital era, as well as reviewing the election around the area of labor law, protection for Bawaslu's, especially ad hoc employees in this digital era also. As we know, that Indonesia will hold simultaneous election in 2024, encompassing the national elections in which we will elect the houses of representatives, regional representative council, and regional legislative council, as well as presidential and vice presidential elections. We will also conduct local election and elect governor and deputy governor in 34 provinces, as well as mayor and deputy mayor in 514 cities or districts. And therefore, it is highly important for us to obtain as many knowledge as of best practices as possible from other countries and how to ensure that fair election so that we can put state knowledge into practice in Indonesia as well. We have here in this panel, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Professor Dr. Hendrik Ading, Professor of Law from Utrecht. Is that correct, sir? Utrecht University in Netherlands. I gathered earlier that you have been here in Indonesia for 13 years. And if you Google his name on social media, you will find that he has been speaking in many universities in Indonesia. I would say that you are very familiar with Indonesian audience. Yes, sir. Thank you. If you see Mr. Professor Ading's curriculum vitae, as I have been, you will see that he has started his experience professionally in 1974 as the Ministry of Environmental Affairs in The Hague, the Netherlands. And he has been an expert on law, especially concerning the conduct of government ever since. If we look for an expert on good governance, I would say that his name is undoubtedly on top of it. So therefore, we also have in here Professor Dr. Kai Liu, PhD alumni of Utrecht University, and is now Professor of Law in Jiangsu, sir, Normal University, yes. As Mr. Bagja is also alumni from the Utrecht University, I would say that your alumni are all achieving and inspiring people, sir. So without further ado, I would please yield the floor to Professor Ading. Sir, the floor is yours.
I just want to check if the slides are there and if everything is working. 1 second, please. Yeah, it's working. Perfect. If you don't mind, I like to walk. Because that's always easier and more relaxed when I'm speaking. It's impossible to speak in 1 hour on good governance. It's impossible to speak in the same hour about, let me say, administrative law. It's impossible to speak in 1 hour on election law. So I had to make a kind of summary, a kind of selection of what would be very interesting for you as members of the election committee, as scholars, as people who are involved in the, let me say, the daily work of the election commission, but also as citizens of the Indonesia. Of course, I will start with some constitutional questions. That's let me say some first part, and then I will say something about principles of administrative law, and then I come to digitalization and law. And I say already, if you are interested, I have no shares in Oxford University Press, but it's interesting. This is the Good Governance book. Everything what I didn't tell this evening about good governance is in the book. So it's a kind of handbook if you are interested. And I also finished earlier this year a book on principles of administrative law in the Netherlands, but that is in Dutch. So I think it's perhaps easier to read, because this is only a book of 300 pages. This is a book of 800 pages. Yeah, this is only a very short summary, so it gives some impression. I'm not sure how we are dealing with the translation. Shall I stop every 5 minutes or something, or are you making at the end a summary?
I would say that the audience understand when what you say. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can just continue. Yeah, because this week we were in different universities in different islands, and mostly I had to stop every 5 minutes, and there was a moderator who made a translation, which was something different from what I had said. But nevertheless, I'm happy that I can speak in English. Okay, that are the 3 main topics which I think are interesting for your organization. I will say something about constitutional law concept and principles. Then I say something about our constitutional state institutions and the relation between these institutions and which legal norms are relevant. And of course, my focus will be on the election committee, but that is a kind of framework. So that will be one part, and then the second part, that will be about administrative law principles, which are in 3 groups, general administrative law principles, general principles of proper administration, and then it's most important, the general principles of good administration. That is the second part I will speak about, and then I will speak about digitalization, about cyber law, a need for good digital governance. And perhaps you would say that is not so relevant for the election committee, but the chairman already said how relevant it is, digitalization and law also for the committee. So earlier in the conference, which was organized by our colleague Abeloudin, about digitalization and law, and I will say something about, let me say, a kind of digitalization process from a more, let me say, data-driven approach to a more value-driven approach. That's very relevant because till now the technicians are doing and steering that digital governance, and there is a need for a more value-driven digital governance. So that are the 3 points, and then some conclusions. Yeah, when we speak about constitutional concept or principles, yeah, that's all, let me say, a point of terminology. When we speak about concepts, it's more broader, more abstract. When we speak about principles, it's more concrete. But for instance, in many constitutional books, they are speaking about the principles of a democratic state, and then they are saying the rechtsstaat, the rule of law, and democracy. So they are, in a sense, qualifying principles, which are, from my perspective, are concepts. So I just want to say, you can say, concepts are more abstract principles. So that there is a question of terminology that's relevant, because then you will see there is a link between concepts and principle. Then, of course, in every state, you know, at least 2 of the 3 are general accepted. The rule of law, the protection of legality, balance of power, independent judiciary, human rights. Interesting in that point is the change of balance of power. Earlier there was a kind of separation of powers. You remember there should be separated between the legislative power, the executive power, and the judicial power. But more and more you see that the administration has become a quasi-legislator. So what we see in practice, there is a new legislator, and that is the executive power. And what is the problem for that? The problem means that the people are no longer represented in the parliament in the law. No, they are putting away because the administration is just implementing the law and making their legislation without a connection with the people. So that's a very fundamental point, that there is a need for more contact with the people, more contact with the society, because you have framework legislation in which you have very abstract norms, and the real legislation is coming from the administration. So therefore, it's not wise to have a pure separation of powers, but to speak more about a balance of power. And the same you see in the relation between the executive and the judiciary. You see also that sometimes the judiciary is fulfilling some executive task. So they are sometimes a part of the administration. So I think, and that's a more fundamental point of thinking, you see a kind of development from separation of powers to a balancing of powers. But of course, the question is, how far are we from that? So that's an interesting discussion, but that is also interesting for your commission, because sometimes, there will be a kind of task which is original from the legislative power, but is done by the administration. So that the question is, is it acceptable or not? Okay, so legality, perhaps it's also to say something about the legality principle. A legality principle, you hear I have make also some constitutional remarks at the beginning, but it's very relevant because from my perspective, they are in practice by constitutional law, they are not using it as a legality principle. No, they make it a legality rule. There should be a legal base. That is the rule. They don't say it's a legality. Yeah, they mention it a principle, but in essence they make a rule of it. There should be a legal base always. And I would think legality principle, it gives the direction. In principle, there should be a legal base, but there are situations without a legal base. And then you have especially these unwritten principles. So it's very interesting to see that fundamental point in legality in relation to balance of power. Of course, an independent judiciary, that's also an interesting development in our country. The independent judiciary is also developing these principles of proper administration, beginselen van behoorlijk bestuur. When you would have studied in the Netherlands, I'm sure you have heard about the word beginselen van behoorlijk bestuur. But that is a very narrow group of principles. That is only about due care, or it's about abuse of power, it is proportionality. So it's relevant, of course it's relevant, but there are more. There are more, and there is a need for more principles. And what do you see in the Netherlands? That the official courts have difficulties with these principles of good governance. They say, no, we are just doing proper governance, only due care, only motivation. So they are missing, they ignore, in a sense, the development of the shifting of power, that the regulation no more primarily is coming from the judiciary, from the legislator. The substance of the legislation is coming from the administration, and you need a correction, or you need support from the court. And I can tell you, after the publication of this book, I was invited by the Council of State in the Netherlands to explain, because the Council of State in the Netherlands is looking for these principles of good governance. So that is an interesting discussion, what, of course, my students already know in my course, how important these principles are, and he can, I'm sure he will bring them in practice here in the election committee, but it's very important. It's very important that broader perspective of these principles of good governance or good administration. Perhaps another word where I also, you hear something about terminology. You perhaps will ask me, Professor, why are you speaking about good governance? And why are you not speaking for good administration? Or you should speak about good governance, or you should speak about good administration. From a terminological point of view, I speak about the government when I speak about all the powers in the state. For me, all the powers in the state are the government. So it's including the legislative power, including the executive power, including the judicial power, and including the force power. They are the government, and the force power in the Netherlands is not a press like in the American literature. No, for me, the force power is the ombudsman, is the court of audit, is the Council of State. So that because they are written down in the Dutch government, in the Dutch Constitution, in chapter 4. So what I want to say is that these, let me say, these broader meaning of the word government is so more than only the administration. And it's sometimes confusing because from social scientists, for social scientists, government is only the administration. So if you are speaking, lawyers and social scientists are speaking with each other, there is sometimes a miscommunication. Use the right word for administration, use the right word for the government. That's at least the discussion also in the Netherlands that is confusing on that point. So, and what is administration? Now, the administration is only one of the powers. It's just the executive power. So good governance means governance, all the powers in the state. Administration is only the executive power. So that's also a question of terminology. So that's about the rule of law, some developments and remarks which are relevant in practice. The second concept, the second principle, is democracy. Next Wednesday, there are elections in the Netherlands. And yeah, I will be in the plane at that moment, sleeping probably. I'm not sure. Depends on how stressful it was, everything. Nevertheless, democracy is at least once in the 4 years, there is the possibility for the people to say something direct. They can choose, they can elect the president, or they can elect member of parliament, they can elect members in the municipality council or in the provincial council. The rest of this period, so the other 3 and almost 4 years, it's only in an indirect way, because you have to elect somebody, but you don't know what he will or she will do. And there is not accountability, they are not accountable to the voters, yeah, in the political sense, but that's, politicians are mostly short-time makers, so they are not looking too far. What I want to say is, in a sense, there is a need for more direct democracy. There is more and more a need for involvement of the people. More and more is needed participation of the citizens. And more is needed independent, transparent activities. And that is relevant for the public institutions, let me say the ministries and the municipalities, the province. But it's also relevant for the election commission. They also have to be, yeah, transparent. Of course, you will be transparent, but it's important to be also a kind of example, also for the institutions which you are supervising, I would say, and I would think. So more than only indirect democracy. So these are forms of direct democracy in the sense of that the people can influence. And if they have some complaints about the elections in, let's say in Jakarta or in, so that they can go to the election commission and say, okay, we have done that problem. So it's very important also as an election commission to have direct contact with the people. So that's more direct democracy. Yeah, and then good governance is the norms for the government. And of course, during my presentation I will explain more detail these 6 principles of good governance, but it is also depends on the function of the institution. So when you are a supervisor, you have another function than when you are a minister, or when you are a mayor, or when you are any public institution. So you always have to look to the context of that institution when you are applying these principles of good governance. So that is important to say, and later on I will say more on that. So based on these concepts and principles, there should be a clarification of the position in the Netherlands of the legislature, the administration, the judiciary, and the fourth power. So I'm speaking about the Netherlands, but I would say you should do that the same in Indonesia. What is the role of each of the institutions? And it's also important to look to the position of the independent administrative authorities, because sometimes supervisors are part of the administration. And then they are saying we are independent, but if it is not guaranteed in the law, they can say they are independent, but when it is not written down, you have not guaranteed that independency. So it's the independency depends on how that is codified in the law, and that it gives in the Netherlands often a confusion, because sometimes they are saying, oh, we are independent administrative authorities because we are not in the building of the ministry, we are in another building, and then you have to take care and to look to the legal base. That's one thing, and then a final thing in relation to these constitutional remarks is that there is, of course, for your country, it's clear when we speak about constitutional review. Constitutional review is done by the Constitutional Court. That's very clear. At the moment in the Netherlands, there is a discussion also to introduce constitutional review, but then constitutional review by the judiciary. So it's more spread out all over the judiciary. All the judges are doing constitutional review, and the idea is not to create a new institution like the Constitutional Court. So it's interesting to see, and to learn from the experience of Indonesia, how that Constitutional Court is working, how the difficulties they had in the beginning to find their position in relation to the other part of the judiciary, in relation to the parliament, in relation to the president. So we think, our government thinks at this moment, there is not yet legislation because it's in discussion, is that constitutional will take place in the Netherlands by the judiciary, by the general judiciary. So it's a big difference with the way they have chosen it in Indonesia, but in most countries where there is constitutional review, it's mostly done by the Constitutional Court. But these courts mostly have a longer history, and when you are created a new institution, it gives a lot of problems our government is thinking. So that are some remarks on constitutional concepts and principles. I don't know if I'm taking too much time, so then something about general administrative law principles. That is what is important, what I said already to you. You had the principles of propriety or the properness to the principles of good governance. It means a more broader a broader approach of these principles of administrative law. In that new book, I make this picture, and I have it also on, that's perhaps easier than everybody can, yeah. Oh, it has a difficult form. You see here three principles, three groups of principles. The widest circle are the general principles of law, like equality and legal certainty, which you find in every field of law, so you find it also in administrative law. These are very broad principles. It looks like 3 eggs, I would say. The smaller circle is the principles of properness, the principles of proper administration. And what you see between these general principles of administrative law and the principles of properness and proper administration, there is a new group which is including these principles of properness, but it is also including more because it's also about transparency, participation, effectiveness, accountability, and human rights. So, and that's coming partly from broadening these principles of proper administration, and partly there is influence from the general principles of law. So that is what the idea is, that they are broader than these principles. The principles of good governance are broader than the principles of proper administration. The theoretical approaches to the legal validity of principles depends on, let me say, how they are and which institution they are using it. When these principles are written down in the law, the legislator has codified it, we still mention it principles. So even a codified principle is a principle. That's important because I don't know if you have had the discussion between Dworkin and Hart. Dworkin and Hart, that they are saying, that Dworkin is saying, no, it's only these, when they are using as unwritten principles, these are principles. When there is codification, it is a rule. That is not the way I'm thinking. Principles are written or principles are unwritten. In both forms, you have these principles. So that's very important, and that is influencing your way of thinking about principles. And principles are using not only by the court, not only by the judiciary, but also by the administration, but also by the legislature. So all the powers in the state are using these principles of good governance. So you can say, when you're looking to the Netherlands situation, but it is in most European countries, and I think in Indonesia the same, partly these good governance principles have been codified in the law, partly they are unwritten. So it's important to see that there is a kind of a continuing process of developing these principles of good governance, in which especially, let me say, the 6 principles are the broader field. Having said that, of course there are also general principles of law. I gave there 2 examples, legal certainty and equality, that are general principles which are used in all the legislation, all the fields of law, so not only administrative law, but also in private law, also in other fields of law. So very broad. But they are also applied in administrative law. Then you have these principles of proper administration. I will not mention all the details, but that are 8 principles of proper administration. So that are de beginselen van behoorlijk bestuur. And then the group number 6 are the principles of good administration or the principles of good governance. I have already explained you difference between good administration, and there you are the principles worked out. Principles of properness, transparency, which is about information and meetings, and principles of participation, several types of participation, principles of accountability, which is more than financial accountability, and the principles of human rights, especially social and community rights. So the position for each of these principles, they are different in the several powers in the states. And the role of supervisors are important also in the development of these principles. And I was happy to hear that your supervisor is also developing these principles of good governance, a very important role, and they are also in a kind of example of a kind of promoter of these principles of good governance, as I explained you earlier. Now, these are a picture we already discussed. Yeah, then the third element is the digitalization. What we are in a phase of steering digital transition. Transition from, let me say, more the factual elements to a more value-driven, good digital governance. And you see elements in constitution and administrative law where the state powers and the positions of the citizens. But in the Netherlands, we have two important problems in relation to the digitalization. First of all, the Dutch government has outsourced the knowledge and the different types of digitalization to the private sector. So it means the private sector has now the knowledge, and the government has known, at least, not enough knowledge about digitalization. So it's very important that your Ministry of Information and Communication is building up that knowledge in that field of digitalization. Because if you don't do that, you will not get the correct norms in relation to digitalization. That's one. And the second point is that in the Netherlands you find two acts, I must say, in which digitalization has been worked out. In the Digital Government Act, it's more the technical sides, so that it is safe to use internet, it's safe to, you get a certain identity number, etc. So the technical side is in the Digital Government Act, and in the General Administrative Law Act, you find the electronic communication between citizens and the administration. That's one. But it's also regulated the electronic communication between the citizens and the judiciary. So it has the development of that process of the transition to a value-driven good digital governance has also taken place in that two laws, in the Digital Government Act and in the General Administrative Law Act. And finally, since 1 January of this year, the Netherlands has a specific algorithm supervisor. A supervisor who's looking to programs like ChatGPT. And probably, as you have read the Nature article end of October, you will see that in the coming months, there will be all kinds of mini ChatGPT programs. So that will be a very, very big problem. A very, very big problem in which the government should take into account what are the consequences. And so therefore, the government has created a special institution, a special supervisor on algorithm. It's important, of course, to give the government power, but it's also important that you give the citizen power. And this year, the Minister of Digitalization has published a kind of agenda in which he gives 4 lines. He wants everyone will be able to participate in the digital age. Everyone will be able to trust the digital world. Everyone will have control of their digital lives, and digital government value-driven and open base for communication. So that is the line of thinking, and that is in that paper worked out. And for each of these 4 lines, there are specific action points, and it would be, I think, useful when also your Minister of Information and Communication would make also a kind of action plan, action program with these lines, because it's important not only to look to misuse of powers and to have a false use of the social media, but you have also to prevent, not only repressive in a criminal law way, but also preventive by steering and making the streams of information and communication clear according to these legal lines. And I think when you are doing in that sense, at the end, by prevention, you will have less problems in the enforcement. And I think, for instance, the Election Commission has a special task that during the elections, they are not using the parties or the members of the parties of the candidates are misusing information. That's very important. When that they are not misusing fundamental rights or violation of fundamental rights. So it's a very important point of view, because what you see, especially in the press, that often all kinds of information, quasi-information, quasi-new information is written down. So it's very important from a democratic point of view that digitalization and the work of the Commission is done well. Now, what are the conclusions? Concept and principles of constitutional law and administrative law are very relevant for each of the powers in the state, including the independent institutions with supervisory functions. So also for the supervisor institution of the election. The position of the institution and the powers of the state should be clear in relation to the other 3 powers, from a separation of power to a balancing of powers. In that sense, it would be nice when, I don't know if the supervisor is making an annual report, to pay attention in his annual report on this point. It is very important to ask attention for that. The development from principles of proper to principles of good governance is also relevant, of course, for the supervisor institution, including the Supervision Commission on the election. And there is, that's my conclusion, there is a need for a good digital governance. Not only repression, but also prevention. And in that process of from repression to prevention, the supervisor can play a very, very important role. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. I would like to say a few resume in Bahasa Indonesia for the audiences. Beberapa hal yang telah disebutkan tadi, mungkin Bapak Ibu izinkan saya untuk sedikit menyimpulkan bahwa terkait dengan apa yang telah disampaikan adalah mengenai pemerintahan yang baik adalah pemerintah yang mendorong atau terdorong dengan nilai-nilai, di mana nilai-nilai atau prinsip-prinsip dan asas-asas yang baik ini seharusnya ditulis dalam hukum secara pasti sehingga dapat ditegakkan dan dapat ada konsekuensi ketika memang prinsip-prinsip ini tidak dilaksanakan. Kemudian sebagai lembaga pengawas pun kita tidak terlepas dari asas-asas tersebut, yang mana penyelenggara pemilu itu harus seperti contohnya untuk terkait dengan independensi sebagai badan pengawas itu harus menjunjung dan terjunjungnya asas tersebut itu hanya dapat dipastikan jika prinsip-prinsip tersebut itu tertulis. Lalu terkait dengan era digitalisasi, pengawasan digitalisasi saat ini meskipun dikuasai oleh swasta, namun pemerintah harus mengembangkan pengetahuan terkait dengan digital untuk mencapai pemerintah digital yang didorong oleh nilai-nilai, sehingga pemerintah harus memastikan bahwa rakyatnya dapat secara aktif berpartisipasi di era digital meskipun harus ada batasan-batasan agar tidak ada agar dapat membatasi misinformasi yang ada. Seperti itu, mohon izin Bapak. Silahkan.
Nambahin ya. Buat teman-teman yang lagi mantau di Zoom, pertama adalah tadi sudah disampaikan oleh Prof. Ading, ini adalah kenapa bukan pemerintahan administrasi yang baik, kenapa good governance hanya asas-asas umum pemerintahan yang baik. Ada perdebatan di situ. Pemerintahan itu adalah semua power, baik eksekutif, legislatif maupun yudikatif. Sedangkan kalau hanya terbatas administratif, nanti dianggapnya hanya terbatas administratif. Sepertinya perdebatan antara apakah ini hukum tata usaha negara atau hukum administrasi negara. Perdebatan itu sudah mulai semenjak kita semester 1 kan. Teman-teman di UGM bisa mengambil ini sebagai tata pemerintahan. Sedangkan kalau di UI dan sebagian wilayah barat menyebutnya administratif negara. Jadi perbedaan itu sepertinya akan terus, tapi ya tinggal diambil saja salah satunya. Kemudian kita sebagai lembaga pengawas itu memang selalu mencari legal basis yang tertulis. Nah, perdebatan sekarang adalah yang menarik dari Prof. Ading sampaikan adalah bagaimana menerjemahkan prinsip-prinsip hukum, prinsip-prinsip good governance yang baik dalam sebuah kasus yang nyata. Misalnya kalau kita terbatas hanya interpretasinya hanya pada artikel itu pasal, maka kita akan sangat normatif sekali, tidak kemudian membuat interpretasi terhadap pasal tersebut. Terhadap misalnya prinsip-prinsip administrasi yang baik, misalnya efektivitas. Seperti sih apa sih efektivitas? Misalnya dalam KPU, misalnya KPU memberikan waktu 5 hari untuk sipol, misalnya 30 hari untuk sipol. Sedangkan pada saat itu sipol naik turun, kemudian diberikan waktu 1 hari untuk memperpanjang. Apakah proper? Kalau dilihat dari pasal, melanggar. Dari pasal pasti melanggar. Tapi kalau dilihat dari interpretasi terhadap prinsip administrasi yang baik, apakah dapat diberi waktu? Kenapa? Karena ada asas untuk melayani semua, karena sistemnya terbatas, sistemnya bermasalah, inkasunya jelas, kasus prakteknya jelas, maka terjemahan terhadap kepastian hukum, pelayanan terhadap semua peserta pemilu, equality terhadap semua peserta pemilu, baik yang mempunyai sistem informasi baik maupun yang tidak mempunyai informasi baik, itu mendapatkan hak yang sama. Itulah selalu kemudian tadi ada 3, ada equality, ada kemudian certainty of legality. Jadi jangan sampai kita hanya kepastian hukumnya itu hanya written, tapi juga harus ada yang unwritten. Itulah membuat nanti pengawas, menarik apa yang kata Prof. Jimli nanti, sarjana hukum ini jangan sampai seperti sarjana titik koma, apa yang dikatakan pasal, itu titik komanya diikuti terus, padahal ada prinsip yang mendasari itu. Ini yang sekarang juga sedang berkembang di Belanda, sehingga kemudian Prof. Ading diundang ke Council of State, Dewan Pertimbangan, untuk kemudian melihat prinsip-prinsip ini diterjemahkan dalam undang-undang atau hakim berani menggunakan prinsip hukum untuk menginterpretasikan suatu kejadian hukum yang pasalnya terbatas dalam hal itu. Artikelnya terbatas, pasal yang mengaturnya sangat terbatas. Jadi ini perkembangan hukum administrasi sekarang, dan kita beberapa kali misalnya mempunyai dalam pertimbangan hukum pasti ada bilang kepastian hukum, tidak kemudian mengacu pada pasal, tapi mengacu pada kepastian hukum prinsip dulu, baru kemudian mengacu pada in kasus hal-hal yang sangat bisa diterjemahkan dalam pasal. Tapi dalam beberapa hal, kasus-kasus itu, 1-2 kasus, kadang tidak bisa kemudian diartikan hanya dalam bertentangan dengan pasal ini. Apa yang bertentangannya? Prinsip apa yang bertentangan? Itu yang kemudian tidak bisa dicarikan, sehingga kemudian itulah fungsi pengawas harus membuat cakrawala tentang prinsip hukum itu lebih baik lagi. Dan kita punya kewenangan ini, kita punya kewenangan untuk menyelesaikan sengketa proses. Dispute of arbitration itu ada di Bawaslu. Sehingga kemudian Bawaslu mempunyai, dan kemudian kalau ada pelanggaran administrasi, the violation of administrative law itu bisa di-appeal, bisa dibanding kepada peradilan administratif court. Ini sangat menarik, kepada peradilan tata usaha negara. Inilah kemudian Bawaslu itu bukan hanya, mohon maaf, bukan hanya penyelenggara, tapi juga menerjemahkan prinsip-prinsip hukum administrasi yang baik ke dalam kasus-kasus yang kita hadapi dalam pemilu. Ini yang tambahannya. Demikian, Mbak.
Baik, terima kasih banyak Bapak. Selanjutnya, maaf. Next one. I'm sorry, sir. He doesn't know selanjutnya, but he has been learning a lot of Indonesian languages recently. He said to me that saya akan pulang besok. It's very good. Pulang, yes. Remember that? You said that to me. Sorry. Oh, okay. Thank you. For the next part, Mr. Professor Liu will be talking about labor law and digital era and election. Mr. Liu, Professor Liu, I'm sorry, the floor is yours.
Selamat malam. Nama saya Professor Kai Liu. Well, it's a very honor to be here. But before I approach my presentation, I would like just to a couple of minutes to, make a brief introduction of my university. My university, Jiangsu Normal University, is located in Xuzhou City, China. And my university is, the host place of my university, Xuzhou City, is located between Beijing and Shanghai, and almost at the middle point. So equally like 700 kilometers from Beijing or from Shanghai. Yeah, and you must be the normal in this world in the middle of my university. You must be that's strange to you, right? Because both in Japan and China we have normal universities, and the origins of normal university can be traced back to 400 to France. 400 years ago, they had this kind of education institutions, which are called Escola Normal, to provide model classrooms and to provide model teaching methods to student teachers, because their students were already teachers or would become teachers in the future. So it's a kind of institution to educate people to become teachers. But most of the normal universities, in China have become comprehensive universities. For example, my university, nowadays has 23 faculties, 23 schools. We don't have a medical school, we don't have aerospace school. We have all schools except that two. Yeah, so it has become a comprehensive university, and my university has around 30,000 students, including bachelor students and master students. Unfortunately, until now, we do not have PhD programs. And we have 2,200 staff, including teaching staff and supporting staff. Among them, 315 professors. And my university, has around 1,500 foreign students studying in it. And a quarter of them are actually from Indonesia. So Indonesia students is the biggest group of foreign students in my university. And so if you have, friends, relatives who are willing to study in our university, very much welcome. Selamat datang, yeah. Welcome, yeah. We also provide scholarships and the living expense, accommodation expense, not as expensive as, for example, in Beijing or Shanghai. Okay, that's a brief introduction. I have finished the work asked by my dean of my law school. Now I'm going to do my own work. My topic today is ensuring, labor rights of employees in temporary positions, temporary employees. And actually the topic that I prepared for the visitings in Indonesia is actually labor rights protection of employees in tech sector. Yeah, but Bahasa SLU is not a tech company, so I don't think that'll be interesting to the audience today. And I learned early today that a portion of employee in Bahasa SLU have temporary positions, temporary contracts. Yeah, so, I have formulated, some analysis in the topic of, labor rights protection vis-a-vis the temporary employees, which might be interesting to your audience. And in China, we also have a big number of temporary employees since the economic reforms. Before the economic reforms, we had only a very tiny private sector. So the economy was at that time, in context of planned economy, was based on state-owned enterprises. And for state-owned enterprises, lifelong job security was provided. Yeah, so at that time, you can say that completely no temporary positions. But since the economic reforms introduced in 1978, private sector has become increasingly bigger and bigger. That brings forward competitions to the state-owned enterprises. And so state-owned enterprises, are arguing that we cannot provide lifelong security, job security to all of the employees. Otherwise, the cost of labor would be much higher than in the private sector. Yeah, so since 1980s, temporary position have been introduced to China on the model of the Japanese temporary position system. Yeah, 劳务派遣 in Japanese language, because they also use the same characters. So we introduced the job system, position system from them. And since 1990s, government agencies, has seen that, it's a good system because it can reduce the cost of labor significantly. So the temporary positions have been also introduced to government agencies, government organs. But because after decades of development, on the one hand, it indeed has reduced the cost of labor very significantly. But at the same time, problems are increasingly spotted. And so, well, in today's presentation, I'm going to approach the legal issues over the temporary employees, the labor rights protection. So the first thing that when we talk about legal protections vis-a-vis a legal subject, the first thing that we should do is to find out the scope, the definition of the legal subject, right? And unfortunately, throughout reviewing the ILO International Labor Conventions, I have failed to find a clear, universally accepted definition, because none of the ILO conventions has established an universally accepted definition of temporary employees. Then I tend to scholarly works. I have found one, and I guess it might be well, popularly accepted because of the citations. And this piece of work is entitled as Job Security and Temporary Employment Contract Theories and Global Standards, written by Muddy Muscle in 2018. And according to him, temporary employees are defined as people hired for a limited period of time or to complete a particular project. And well, this is actually highly related to well, the situations in tech companies, which I talked in the past days. Because in tech companies, they well, we call it the side jobs, not the core jobs, not the core positions, are increasingly outsourced to third party, or are increasingly well put the temporary employees in. Yeah, so it's the same situation actually. So now a second question after we find out the definition of temporary employees. What legal issues are concerning temporary employees? Yeah? And issues I have listed out on the slides, yeah, including but not limited to, firstly, equal treatment. Equal treatment, a reflection of equity in the field of labor law. Well, includes well, several aspects, including equal pay, equal working conditions, and equal benefits for similar work. The benefits here refers to including, for example, the social security benefits. And later I will talk, I will discuss them one by one in details. A second issue would be minimum wage, being paid at least the minimum wage or the prevailing wage for their industry and the location. It is one of the big challenges in China, because I don't know the situation here, but in China, you know, which is, I mean, the area is very big. China is a very big country. So the jurisdiction to set out minimum wage is not in the hand of the central government, but has been distributed to provincial governments because of the unequal economic development among across the country. For example, in the eastern part, where Beijing, Shanghai, and my province are located, well, the economic development is much better than in, for example, the western part. So definitely, the minimum wage couldn't be the same, yeah? And this caused a problem because enterprises which has branches in economically developed regions, while temporary positions, they are paying the temporary employees with their own standard, which are formulated in the less developed areas. Yeah, so that amount of salary are below the minimum salary set out in the provinces where the temporary positions are set in. Yeah, so that causes a problem. Of course, you can say that that is the violation of the compulsory standards over minimum wage, but also in the sense of temporary employee protection, it is has also I would say a violation of the equal pay, right? And a third issue is the overtime pay. Overtime pay as per applicable labor laws. Yeah, I think most of the countries have established limits on the regular working hours. Like in China, for example, 8 hours per day and 14 hours per week. Yeah, so I guess it is also the situation here, right? Next issue is working beyond that time limits, there should be overtime pay. But of course, there are maximum limits on the total hours per day and per week. In China, it's 44 hours per week. And next issue is the workplace safety. That means a safe working environment should be also according to the temporary positions. In China, it's also a big challenge because, for example, the electronic power plants, they have a big proportion of temporary positions, and the people in those positions are usually sent to, to finish the works at the plant tower, which has very big risks. Yeah, but people in permanent positions, they sitting, they standing at the bottom of the towers and instructing the temporary position employees to finish that job. And a lot of controversies in the internet has been arising because of the unequality, because of the work safety problems from the electronic power plants. And next issue is the discrimination and harassment. Discrimination, from both the employer itself, that relates to what I have mentioned, equal pay, for example, equal treatment, and also could be from permanent employees. We will talk about later. And the next issue is the paid leave, for example, sick leave or paid vacation leave. So now we are going to examine them one by one. First one, equal treatment. Equal treatment in the context of labor rights for temporary employees means that they should be treated fairly and without discrimination in comparison to permanent or regular employees performing similar work. There are several aspects of equal treatment, including, for example, firstly, wages. Yeah, wages. Temporary. That's to say, temporary employees should receive the same hourly wage or salary as permanent employees who perform equivalent tasks and have similar qualifications and experience. And this is, the